Welcome to my channel, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1. Ever since I met Laura, I've always believed that a bond built on trust is unbreakable. We were the envy of our circle, with our tales of love lasting over 2 decades. I had no idea that a simple envelope would shatter that belief. It was a crisp autumn day. It was a beautiful afternoon, with the trees glowing in a fiery hue and secrets carried on the breeze. After a long day at work, I was walking home and noticed a stark white envelope in our mailbox. There was no stamp, no address, just a simple handwritten mark on the front. I was curious, so I quickly tore it open. The letter inside was typed and the words sent a chill down my spine. "Open your eyes, Mark, love. Can blind, but the truth can hurt even more. Laura isn't as faithful as you think." I felt my heart skip a beat. It was a sick joke. Who would do such a thing, and why? I looked around, half expecting to see a pair of sneering eyes watching me from the shadows, enjoying the aftermath of their cruel prank. But the street was quiet, with just the rustling leaves and my racing heartbeat breaking the silence. I hid the letter in my briefcase, deciding not to share it. I decided to keep an eye on Laura for now. I wanted to see if I could find any signs that would confirm or refute this terrible accusation. I still believed in her, in us. But I had this gnawing feeling at the pit of my stomach, like a worm eating away at the apple of our love. Over the next few days, everything seemed normal. Laura was her usual chirpy self. She was filling our home with her laughter and love, but then I noticed it. Robert, our close friend for years, a man I'd shared countless memories with, was around more than usual. At first, I dismissed it as mere coincidence, but the signs started to add up. The stolen glances they exchanged when they thought I wasn't looking, the hushed conversations that had stopped when I walked into a room, the secret smiles that hinted at shared secrets. I wanted to confront her and ask her outright, but every time I mustered the courage, she'd look at me with those same eyes filled with love, and my doubts would melt away. But the envelope message remained lurking in the shadows, reminding me that sometimes what seems too good to be true usually is. It was good to be true. Days turned into weeks, and my suspicions grew. Each interaction between Laura and Robert seemed more significant, and every whisper echoed loudly in my mind. Every touch sent an electric shock down my spine. The world around me started to shift, and doubt clouded every beautiful memory we'd built. I've always been the type of person who gets things done, so I decided to look into it further. I started keeping track of Laura's movements, which was something I never thought I'd do. I made notes of the time she'd take calls outside, her sudden late-night outings, and those weekend get-togethers with girlfriends I'd never heard of. My journal started filling up with these. I made notes of what I saw, but it wasn't just notes. It was a testament to a crumbling foundation. One day, as I was making another entry, I came across a recipe from a fancy restaurant. The date was from one of those nights Laura had claimed to have a girls' night out, but what caught my attention was the total, which was far too high for just one person. My heart raced as I remembered her coming home that night, her makeup slightly smudged and her demeanor slightly off, with the receipt as my cue. I decided to look into it further and installed a discreet tracking app on Laura's phone. I felt bad about betraying her trust, but I had to know the truth. The app gave me exactly what I was looking for. The locations she frequented matched Robert's. They were together at parks, cafes, and even on one occasion at a secluded lakeside cabin. One evening after another late night at work, I confronted Laura. Her face turned ashen as I listed my observations. My voice trembled, barely concealing the heartbreak. I was surprised when she laughed, but it was a forced, nervous laugh. She accused me of being paranoid and questioned my trust in our relationship, reminding me of our years together. She said, "Mark, you're seeing shadows where there are none." That's when her gaslighting began, making me question everything. Maybe I was being paranoid, or maybe all this was. It might have been just a figment of my overactive imagination, but then a ray of hope, or perhaps despair, came from the most unexpected source. Robert's wife, Emily. She called me one morning, her voice trembling. She'd also found signs, hints, and whispers of betrayal. She'd been dismissed, laughed at, and accused of being delusional. We were two souls broken by the same deceit. We decided to find undeniable proof and confront the liars that had torn our worlds apart. The hunt was on, and the stakes had never been higher. One of those cool, foggy mornings, I found solace in our town's park. The mist clung to the trees. The world felt muffled and dreamlike as I walked down the familiar paths. Each step seemed to echo with memories of happier times, when doubt and heartbreak were foreign concepts. In the silence, I heard a familiar voice call out to me. I turned around and saw Jane, a mutual friend of Laura's and mine, with her son. Jane had been there for us through thick and thin, through the good times and the bad. She'd seen us at our best and at our worst. She'd been a rock. She came over and sat down on a bench nearby. The cold metal was a stark contrast to the warmth of memories associated with this place. I took a deep breath and told her everything. I told her about the letter, about tracking it, about confronting it, about the alliance with Emily. As I told her, I could see a mixture of sympathy and concern in Jane's eyes. I finished, and there was a long pause. The weight of what I'd revealed was palpable. Finally, Jane spoke. Her voice was filled with a sadness I'd never heard before. "Mark," she began hesitantly, "there's something I think you should know." She revealed that she'd seen Laura and Robert together on multiple occasions over the past few months. They'd been at cafes, malls, and even at Jane's own birthday party. They'd always find corners to whisper, share fleeting touches, and exchange looks filled with a secret intimacy. Jane hadn't thought much about it. She initially assumed it was just a close friendship, but as the instances grew, her suspicions began to mount. She even recalled a particular evening when she caught them sharing a much too intimate moment in her garden. Jane's revelations were like a hammer to my already fragile heart, but what she said next was even more shattering. Robert was known to be manipulative in the past. He had charmed and deceived others, leaving a trail of broken relationships in his wake. His modus operandi was always the same: befriend, charm, and then destroy. Laura wasn't. His first victim, and if I didn't stop him, she wouldn't be the last. I felt a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, but most of all, determination. With Jane's insights, Emily's support, and my own observations, I was building a case against Robert and the shadows of doubt and deceit that had crept into my life. It was time to bring everything to light and confront the two people who had betrayed me the most. The storm was coming, and I was at its center. The following week, I meticulously planned the confrontation with Jane and Emily's help. We arranged for a dinner at my house. We said it was just a reunion of old friends, a chance to catch up and celebrate our shared history. Robert and Laura had no idea what was going on. The evening started off nicely. The golden glow of the setting sun filtered through the curtain, and soft music played in the background. There was laughter and chatter in the room, making it seem like everything was fine. But after dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I took a deep breath and started by saying that tonight wasn't just about memories or celebrating friendship. It was also about facing the truth and confronting the shadows that had crept into our lives. The room went silent. Laura's face turned pale, and Robert shifted uncomfortably. I continued laying out all the evidence, from the letter to Jane's revelations, from the tracking results to the emotional pain that their deceit had inflicted on Emily and me. The atmosphere was thick with emotion. Accusations flew, voices raised, and, for the first time, the mask of deception started to come off. Robert tried to make himself look like the victim by saying he was lonely and unappreciated. He said Laura was a beacon of hope in his life. Laura seemed confused and lost. She said she was sorry, but also accused me of being insecure. She said Robert was charming, but also that she felt taken for granted in our relationship. Jane and Emily were my support. They called Robert out on everything. They were reminded of the pain they had caused, the trust they had broken, and the lives they had torn apart. Hours seemed to pass. The room was a battleground of emotions, and the scars of betrayal were laid bare for all to see. As the first light of dawn started to peek through, one thing was clear: relationships were forever altered. There was no going back and no healing the wounds. All that was left were the pieces of shattered trust and the daunting task of moving forward. As everyone left the house, it was eerily silent, but it was also free from the chains of deceit. I sat alone, reflecting on the storm that had passed, feeling both drained and liberated. The confrontation had been painful, but it had also been necessary. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least now it was based on truth. After that crazy night, life seemed almost surreal. The town, which I had always loved, now seemed to bear the scars of betrayal at every turn. I couldn't go anywhere without being followed by whispers, some of them filled with sympathy and others with morbid curiosity. The first few days were a blur of pain and numbness. Emily and I leaned on each other, finding solace and sharing our anguish. Our meetings became frequent, and a special connection began to grow between us. It wasn't romantic, but rather a mutual understanding and support system built on the ruins of deceit. Laura was overwhelmed by guilt and retreated from her social life, moving out to find solace in solitude. She was grappling with the consequences of her actions, as I learned from mutual friends. I also learned that she had started therapy to find answers, and perhaps a path to redemption. Robert was trying to make himself look good by saying he was misunderstood and that he was just caught up in a lot of emotions. But people could see through his excuses. He was treated like he didn't exist by a lot of people, and he even had to leave a few community committees. This was about a month after the confrontation. I got a letter from Laura. It was handwritten in her familiar script, and it tugged at my heartstrings. She wrote about her remorse, her realization of the depth of her betrayal, and the pain she had caused, not just to me, but to herself as well. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She just wanted me to understand her side of the story, her loneliness in our relationship, her vulnerability, and how Robert had expertly reading the letter was an emotional roller coaster. I felt anger, pity, sadness, and love all at once. It didn't change the past or mend the broken bonds, but it did provide a perspective and a glimpse into the human frailty that led to the betrayal. The town, ever resilient, slowly started to heal. New stories replaced the old and life resumed its pace. But for those of us at the heart of the storm, Emily, who found strength in her pain, started a support group for people dealing with betrayal. It became her mission to help others navigate the treacherous waters of deceit and come out stronger. I turned to writing, pouring my emotions, experiences, and lessons into words. The journal that had once been a record of suspicion transformed into a memoir of. With Jane's support, I even got it published. The book, titled Shadows of Deceit, became a local bestseller and resonated with many who had faced similar betrayals. The final chapter of my story was marked by a simple yet profound event on the anniversary of the confrontation. I visited the same park where Jane had revealed the truth to me. Sitting on the familiar bench, I took out Laura's letter. I read the letter one last time and then set it alight, watching the ashes float away on the gentle breeze. It symbolized my letting go, my release from the chains of the past, and my first step towards a future of healing and hope. Story number 2, buckle up, because this one's wild. To understand the full picture, you've got to know how it all started. It was one of those classic rainy days in Edinburgh. You know the type. The rain drizzles down just lightly enough that it's almost romantic, but just heavy enough to warrant an umbrella. The streets had that fresh rain scent, and the cobblestones glistened with tiny puddles. The gray sky was reflected in the puddles on the street, but I wasn't in a hurry. I was enjoying the beauty of the rain. I was trying to take a picture of the castle from this particular angle when I bumped into someone looking down. I saw this girl, Alicia, on the ground. Her papers were scattered, her umbrella flipped inside out. What caught my attention was her reaction. She was laughing. She wasn't embarrassed or angry, just genuinely laughing at the mess we'd created. We got to talking, and there was this instant connection. It's crazy. It felt like I'd known her for ages. She had these piercing blue eyes that seemed to dance when she spoke, and a laugh that was so contagious I found myself chuckling along even when nothing was particularly funny. Alicia was studying art history, and she showed me the city through her eyes that day, and I was utterly captivated, both by her and the stories she told. Our dates were straight out of a rom-com. Picnics in Princess Street Garden, late-night walks along the Royal Mile, sharing stories, dreams, and churros from that tiny stall near the Scottish National Gallery. It felt like fate had thrown us together. I proposed just a few months later, under the twinkling fairy lights of Circus Lane. She said yes without hesitation. Our friends said we were rushing things, but it felt right. We were young, in love, and had dreams as vast as the sky. The wedding was a small, intimate affair, but brimming with genuine happiness. It was like something out of a fairy tale. I didn't know at the time that every story has its twists and turns, but that's for later. Reddit. This is where my gut feeling started to creep in, even though I didn't fully realize it at the time. After the fairy tale start, Life began settling into a sort of rhythm. We were newlyweds, figuring out how to live together, sharing our space and our lives. The fun part was getting to know all of Aaliyah's friends. She had this close-knit group of friends. There was a knitting group from college that met every other week, and I sometimes joined in. There was one friend of Aaliyah's, Zara, who always stood out. She was a fiery redhead with an incredibly sharp wit, and always seemed to have a protective aura around Aaliyah. One day after one of those dinner get-togethers, I was helping clean up when Zara cornered me in the kitchen. She looked serious and almost concerned. I remember thinking she was going to talk about some diet or something. Kitchen hack, but no. She leaned in and whispered in a low voice that I could barely hear over the noise of the party, "John, Aaliyah isn't who you think she is." I blinked, taken aback. Was this some sort of joke? I chuckled awkwardly, trying to brush it off, thinking maybe this was some weird way of hers to break the ice. But the look on Zara's face was serious. She continued, "Just be careful, watch out for signs." I'll admit, alarm bells did ring in my head. I brushed them aside though. I figured Zara was just being overly protective, or maybe she had some unresolved issues with Alicia. Besides, I trusted Alicia. Our love story felt too real and too raw to be tainted by whatever Zara was hinting at. I gave Zara a tight smile and nodded, saying thanks for the concern, but I trust Alicia with all my heart. Zara just looked at me with sad eyes, like she wished she could say more but was bound by something. That night, as I lay in bed next to Alicia, her rhythmic breathing lulling me to sleep, I couldn't shake off Zara's words. Every time doubt crept in, I'd brush it away. Love, after all, was about trust, but Reddit, as you'll come to see, planted a seed that would grow into an overhanging cloud of doubt. So, about trust, the thing is that once there's even a tiny crack in its foundation, everything else seems a little off. I have to admit that Zara's words stuck with me. Maybe it was that hint of doubt that made me notice things I would have otherwise overlooked. Fast forward a few weeks, and it was a Saturday morning. Alicia had this ritual of heading out to her favorite cafe every Saturday to catch up on her reading. She'd get a massive cup of chai latte, immerse herself in a book, and just escape for a while. I'd often teased her about her sacred ritual. Weekend ritual, but deep down I loved how passionate she was about her little routines. That morning she left her bag on the kitchen table in her hurry and called out laughing, "If I forget, one day could you remember to pack that for me too?" I remember laughing at her adorable clumsiness after she left. After that, I decided to be the good husband and pack up her essentials, her wallet, her book, and her favorite pen. But as I was doing so, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic at the bottom of her bag. I found a shimmering necklace at the bottom of her bag. It was delicate with a sparkling pendant that had an intricate design. I didn't recognize it, but it was beautiful. I'd never seen it on Alicia, and I certainly hadn't gifted it to her. My first thought was that it might be a family heirloom or something she'd bought recently. Later that evening, as we settled in with some takeaway I casually brought it up. I said, "Hey, I found this necklace in your bag. It's pretty new." She looked momentarily taken aback, then replied, "Oh, that? It's from my aunt. She gave it to me last week when I visited her." She quickly took it from my hand and set it aside, but I had a feeling something was off. It was in the split. She took a moment to answer, or maybe it was the way she avoided eye contact, or maybe it was my mind playing tricks on me, but I had a feeling there was something she wasn't telling me. I really wanted to believe her, I told myself, that Zara's words were just playing tricks on my mind. There was a perfectly reasonable explanation for the necklace, but as the night wore on and Alicia snuggled up to me, the weight of the necklace felt like an anchor pulling me down into a sea of doubt. From then on, things started to spiral out of control on Reddit, and I felt like I was in one of those mystery novels. After the necklace incident, I tried to get back to our normal routine. We laughed, made plans, and even talked about taking a trip to the Highlands together. However, every so often, I'd catch Alicia looking distant and lost in thought. I put it down to stress, or maybe some issues at her work, which we all have. One night, we were watching a rom-com on the couch and sharing a blanket. Alicia had her phone next to her, and I noticed it lighting up repeatedly. It was buzzing, then pausing, then buzzing again. Alicia's phone is always buzzing because she's popular. But that night, every time it did, she would subtly shift her position, making sure the screen stayed hidden from my view. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the movie, but it was like a mosquito in a quiet room, impossible to ignore. Then, during a particularly quiet scene in the movie, it buzzed again, lighting up bright enough for me to see. I saw a message from Elle that read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow." I felt a bit disappointed. The way it was written, it wasn't just a casual meet-up. There was intimacy in those words. Who was Elle? None of her close friends had names starting with that letter. I asked who it was as casually as I could. "Texting you this late." She glanced at her phone and quickly replied, "Oh, just some work stuff. You know how it is." She didn't open the message, though, but turned off her phone screen and snuggled closer to me. Sleep was elusive that night. I kept thinking about worst-case scenarios. Was it a colleague, an old flame? The unknowns were eating at me, but more than anything, it was the secrecy and hiding. If it was innocent, why not just tell me the next morning? She was gone early, leaving a note about an early work meeting. I was restless, debating whether to confront her or to let it go. By evening, I decided that trust was. Key and I'd been acting like a crazy, paranoid husband. Hey Reddit, the rabbit hole just kept getting deeper. John was in London for work, while Theo was back in Edinburgh for a few days. We met up at a local pub to catch up on life, work, and all the usual banter. About halfway through our second pint, Theo asked John if everything was okay with him and Alicia. I remember frowning slightly and replied, "Yeah, mate, why?" Theo took a deep breath. "I might be wrong, and I don't want to cause any trouble, but I thought I saw Alia at King's Cross Station in London last Tuesday. She was with some guy, tall, dark-haired, and looked a bit like a model. They seemed close. My heart started racing. Alicia hadn't mentioned going to London. In fact, she told me she had. I had meetings in Birmingham that day. I tried to keep my cool. "Theo, you're sure it was her? King's Cross is always packed." "It could have been anyone." Theo looked uncomfortable. "I wasn't spying or anything. I was just waiting for my train, but I'm pretty sure it was her. She had that unique pendant around her neck. One you found in her bag." I took a deep breath. My mind was racing. Was Theo mistaken? But the mention of the necklace made it hard to believe it was just a coincidence. I finished my drink and headed home. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. I decided to confront Alicia about it. As I stepped into our apartment, she greeted me with her usual bright smile, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. She greeted me with her usual bright smile, completely oblivious to the storm raging inside me. "How was your drink with Theo?" she asked casually. I blurted out, "Were you in London last Tuesday?" She looked taken aback. "No, I was in Birmingham for meetings." "Remember why Theo said he saw you at King's Cross with some guy?" Alicia laughed, but there was an edge to it. Theo must have been mistaken. I was nowhere near London. Maybe he saw someone who looked like me. I wanted to believe her. I desperately did, but the lies, the necklace, the texts, everything piled up, making it hard to see through the fog of doubt. She must have noticed. She came over, looked me in the eye and said, "John, you trust me, right?" I nodded, even though I wanted to scream yes. My thoughts were all over the place. It's easy to lose trust in someone, and I was at a crossroads, wondering which path to take. So, what's the best way forward here? Buckle up, because this chapter in our story is pretty wild. It was a sunny Saturday morning, almost deceptively peaceful given the storm that was brewing inside our relationship. I was tidying up the study, clearing out old papers and random junk we'd accumulated over the years in my quest. To get things in order, I opened a drawer that was Alia's domain. It was mostly filled with her stuff. Things she'd pick up, mean to use and then forget, amidst the collection of pens, old receipts, and miscellaneous knickknacks. I spotted a folded paper that looked distinctly like a hotel booking confirmation. My curiosity got the better of me, and I took a look. Maybe it was wrong to snoop, but I couldn't help myself. I opened it and saw that it was a reservation for the Ritz in London, a luxurious suite for a weekend. There was a reservation under Alia's name. My heart raced. I remembered seeing Theo in London. This was evidence, right? Or was I jumping to conclusions? I needed answers that evening over dinner. I slid the confirmation across the table and said, "I found this today. I'm planning a trip to London for Zara's birthday. I thought I'd treat her to a fancy weekend, a girls' trip." Elia's eyes widened momentarily. but she quickly regained her composure. Do you remember Zara, who warned me about Elysia? This doesn't make sense. If Zara felt Elysia was hiding something, why would she plan a luxurious weekend away with her? Why didn't you tell me, and why would you take Zara to the Ritz? It seems excessive. She hesitated, biting her lip. I thought it would be a nice surprise for everyone. After everything that's happened recently, I thought Zara and I could use some quality time together. But it seemed like my wife was spinning a web of lies right in front of me. I was starting to lose trust in her, and the weight of all these secrets was getting to me. To break it completely, I tried to push the doubts aside, hoping there was some truth in her words. But the idea of my Elysia at the Ritz with someone who wasn't me painted a picture I couldn't ignore. Would I ever find out the truth behind all these half-told tales? Read it. I knew I had to confront Zara. If there was even a grain of truth in Alicia's story, Zara would be my ticket to clarity. But if Elysia was lying, well, Zara had already warned me once, hadn't she? I gave Zara a ring, and we decided to meet at this quiet little cafe in Edinburgh. It's the kind of place where conversations feel private, even amidst the clatter of cups and saucers. I walked in and saw Zara by the window. She looked surprised and concerned. I took a deep breath and went over to her. Zara didn't waste any time asking, John, why did you want to meet? Is everything okay with Elysia? I showed her the hotel booking confirmation. Elysia told me she booked it. This is for your birthday. A girl's trip to the Ritz? Is that true? Zara's eyes went wide. She looked genuinely shocked. John, I have no idea what you're talking about. My birthday isn't even around this date, and I haven't planned any trips with Elysia. My heart sank. This is another lie. But Elysia said. Zara cut me off. John, I told you about Elysia. She's been acting strange lately. She's distancing herself, making excuses, and always on her phone. I thought it was just stress or work, but now I'm worried. The sighting, the texts, and the necklace were bad enough, but this is the last straw. Each lie was a dagger to the heart. Slowly, I was losing the trust I once had in Elysia. Zara, what do you think is going on? She sighed deeply, looking out the window. It felt like a haven for our love story, but now it felt like a labyrinth with secrets lurking in every corner. One thing was clear, though. I was determined to find my way out and uncover the truth about Alicia's web of lies. If you thought this journey was a roller coaster, read it. You're in for a shocker. Hold on tight. I decided to get to the bottom of this. No more doubts, no more second guessing. I had to see for myself, so I decided to surprise Alia during her supposed girls' trip to the Ritz. If she was indeed there with Zara, I'd apologize, tell her it was a romantic gesture gone wrong, and make amends. I wasn't going to find out the truth by sitting around. I took an early train to London, thinking about what I'd heard. I arrived at the Ritz, and it was even more impressive than I'd imagined. Was this where Alicia's secrets was set? I took a deep breath and went to the front desk. I wanted to find out what room Elias was in, but as luck would have it, I didn't need to ask. I saw her in the corner of my eye. I caught sight of her in the hotel bar, laughing and dancing around. It wasn't Zara, though. It was a man, tall and dark-haired, who seemed familiar. As I got closer, I realized it was Lucas, my brother. He'd disappeared years ago, traveling the world and leaving his past behind. We'd lost touch, and the last time I'd seen him was as a free. I saw a different person to the polished man in front of me. I saw the laughter, the touching of hands, and the shared glances. It wasn't just friendly, it was intimate. I felt betrayed, not just by a partner, but by my own family. I retreated to a quiet corner and watched them for what felt like hours, trying to process everything. The scene in front of me made me think. How did they meet? How long had this been going on? Why Lucas? I felt lost, like a stranger in a city and a life I thought I knew. I was overwhelmed by emotions in the situation. I left the Ritz, leaving two people who meant the world to me behind. Now I'm in a situation I never thought I'd be in. I never thought I'd find myself in this position. The combined sting of betrayal from your partner and your own flesh and blood is something indescribable. But here I was, ready to face it head on. After leaving the Ritz, my steps had taken me to a solicitor's office. I got divorce papers drawn up right away. It felt impulsive and rash, But in that moment, it was the only tangible action that seemed to provide some semblance of control over the spiraling chaos. With the papers in hand, I went back to the Ritz. I was on a mission to confront and close this chapter of my life. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted closure. When I went back to the bar, I saw them there, still engrossed in their world. The weight of the papers in my hand felt both heavy and liberating. I summoned all the strength I had left and marched up to them without a word. I slammed the divorce papers onto their table. The intimate setting and the sudden noise startled nearby patrons. Ilya's eyes widened in horror. "John, what's this?" she whispered, her voice shaky. Lucas looked up, his face pale, and I could see guilt in his eyes. "John, let me explain," he began, but I raised a hand to stop him. "There's nothing to explain," I said coldly. I saw everything I needed to say. Ilya's eyes filled with tears. "John, I'm so sorry." Lucas was always the smooth talker. He tried to interject with John, saying they hadn't planned for this and it just happened, but I was done with the lies, deceit, and heartbreak. I told them both to save it. I turned on my heel and walked away from the devastation I'd left behind. The noise of the city outside mirrored my thoughts. Amidst the chaos, I found a glimmer of calm. I would rebuild, take risks, and move forward from this pain. It's challenging to articulate the emotions that flood your mind when the two people you trust the most betray you. It's like drowning, like the weight of the world is on your shoulders. But as I left the Ritz that day, and I also left behind the chains of betrayal, ready to embark on the journey of healing. Reddit, here's the final chapter of this painful saga. Brace yourselves. The cold London air felt sharp against my skin as I left the Ritz. The city lights, which once represented dreams and possibilities, now only last. As I walked, shadows of doubt and pain followed me. I was leaving the life I had known, the love I had felt, and the trust I had so effortlessly given. The tube whisked me away, and flashes of the past haunted me. I thought of our first meeting in the rain-soaked streets of Edinburgh, the warmth of Alicia's embrace, and Lucas's infectious laughter from our childhood. Memories that were now tainted and forever altered by betrayal. Reaching the station, I sat on a bench watching the world go by in a blur. Strangers rushed past, each with their own story and their own pain. It made me realize that, no matter how unique our stories are, we're all bound by the threads of love, trust, and heartbreak. I was so upset I started crying, but it wasn't just because I'd lost Lucas or because I'd been betrayed. It was just the sheer unexpectedness of it all, the abrupt realization that life could take such a cruel turn without warning. With a heavy heart, I got on a train heading north, away from London. I didn't have a destination in mind, but that didn't matter. I needed to get away to find a place where memories wouldn't haunt me. The hours turned into days. The train chugged on, the landscapes changed, and strangers were kind. They helped heal my wounded soul. Finally, I arrived in Manchester. I didn't have any connections with the city, but it felt right. Here I was, amidst the red-bricked buildings and bustling streets, ready to rebuild. Not to forget, but to carry forward. I would bear the scars of my past, but I wouldn't let them define me. So here I am, writing this out and sharing my story with you. I don't know what the future holds, but I've learned that life is unpredictable. It throws curveballs when you least expect them, but in the face of heartbreak, all we can do is pick up the pieces and keep moving forward. Thanks for listening. It's not the ending I had hoped for, but it's the one I've got, and maybe just maybe that's okay.